Welcome back and thanks for keeping it KBC. In case you just joined us, this KBC News Check, and the first hour we are done with politics, and now we want to look at agriculture value chains and additions. Because you bear me witness in the last, if you have been on social media for the last couple of days, there has been a trending hashtag on the lowering of food prices, and the cost of living has skyrocketed. We've seen it forming fodder for many political alignments in the country. But away from the politics themselves, we are on the ground. We are looking at the value addition for potatoes, or potatoes if you like, and mangoes, especially now that as a country, we are in the season of mangoes. We are experiencing a lot of glut. But at the end of the day, we need food security and we also need money in our pockets. So how do we change the narrative? Well, to help me drive that conversation in studio, I'm joined by Madam Sharon Waswa, who works for the Center for Africa Bio-Entrepreneurship. Well, a lot of you may not have heard of it, but to start us off, what exactly does the Center for Africa Bio-Entrepreneurship do?
Thank you very much. So from the word Center for African Bio-Entrepreneurship, KABI is a non-profit organization, and the focus for KABI is to create employment specifically for youth in agriculture and other biological sciences. We have a keen focus in agriculture, and what we do is around capacity building and training for youth. And also we do a lot of work on market linkages. Yeah, and most recently we have a program called Utafiti Sera, and this basically focuses on policy research to inform actions towards creating employment for youth in agriculture, in agro-processing and agro-innovations, which are more exciting ventures or aspects of agriculture for the youth. Yes.
And a Center for Africa Bio-Entrepreneurship, what are some of the projects that we can see and say that this is something that you guys help build?
One of the key projects that is currently going on, and which will culminate in a conference this week, is the research that we've been doing on potato and mango value chains. And we've been doing this in Nyandarua County, in Makueni County, and in West Pokot County. Yes, there is a lot that is going on in West Pokot in regards to potato and mango value chains.
You've talked about you have is it a seminar conference?
Yes.
Kindly touch on that.
So this Thursday and Friday, the 24th and 25th, there will be a national conference on youth employment creation. And the focus of this conference basically is to channel a discourse on how better we can leverage opportunities in the potato and mango value chains to create employment for the youth. Yes, this will happen at Windsor Hotel, and would be engaging high and middle-level policymakers, investments, people interested in investment, in financing, in e-commerce, and we want to have discussions basically on how do we make agriculture more attractive to the youth. We've tried that over the years, and still you can bear me witness that it's still a challenge. Yes.
And as I had alluded to earlier, is that now we are in the season of mangoes. And lots of them, I come from a county where we have lots of them. But unfortunately, because of value addition and because of some, the fruit fly has actually also made the business there be quite hard. How can we change that narrative? Because in the next couple of months, we won't be having mangoes, but we can, as you talk about the value chain, these are the same mangoes that we can dry, we can actually export as well. And the potatoes. Yesterday, the president did flag off 23 vehicles to 23 counties that are taking relief food to Kenyans. But we always have a glut when it comes to milk. Sometimes we have a glut in milk, potatoes, and now mangoes as well.
Yeah, that is very true. And we've had this before. I remember even the Deputy President once mentioned that the food challenges or food security challenges we have in Kenya is not a matter of production, but it is a matter of having more in one part of the country and less in another part of the country. Issues around the fruit fly. There is a lot of work going on when it comes to pest management and pest control. And there's just so much that can be done, because there needs to be a balance between the quality of export we produce in terms of pesticides level and them not having fruit flies. And KEFIS has done a lot on this, and I know there are some private investments that are going on how to use biological, say, control methods to cater to these. But in the meantime, because it can take years, you saw for avocado it took 10 years before the markets were opened again, there is still demand for mangoes, say, here in Kenya. And like you correctly put it, there's opportunity for value addition, so we can have dried mangoes. We still don't have enough of them on the supermarket shelf. So Makueni, for instance, have a fruit processing plant, which I believe is a good step. I think there needs to be more of that, so that farmers can take their produce to this particular plant. It can be processed to juices, to dried fruit, and various other products. So that is why we are having this conference, so we can discuss, so how can we attract more investment into the value addition process.
And the good thing is that a lot of the lessons learned from the Makueni County can be replicated in other counties, but you'll tell us more about that. Allow me to introduce our next guest. Thank you indeed for making time, and he is Dr. Anthony Mveyange. Mveyange.
Yes.
Karibu sana.
Asante. Sana nashukuru.
He is the Executive Director for Partnership for Africa Social and Governance Research, PASGR. Kindly tell us something about PASGR.
Thank you very much for hosting us, and been listening to our colleagues at KABE. Quite an interesting discussion. So PASGR stands for Partnership for African Social and Governance Research. It's a not-for-profit organization set up in 2011. Basically, it addresses three key areas. One is research and policy, where we generate evidence, the utafiti sera, that we work with other partners like KABE. We also focus on higher education, where we have a master's and a doctoral program in public policy. A master's program we're running in 8 countries, 13 universities in Africa. A doctoral program we're running in 3 hubs, West Africa, East Africa, and Southern Africa. And now we're expanding to Francophone. And also we have what we call professional development and training, which basically retools and enhances capacity of researchers and policymakers in Africa. PASGR at the moment is operating in about 26 countries in Africa. Okay. So we generate evidence in different areas, including agriculture, urbanization, water, governance challenges. Now we are looking into gender and inclusion issues, and so on and so forth. So basically we are focused more on advancing research and training excellence in public policy and governance in Africa.
Indeed. And looking at the countries, you've mentioned a lot of countries in Africa. When we have something, we have it in abundance. When we don't have something, we really don't have anything. Because looking at the countries like Kenya, for example, I'm quite sure you had this conversation. When we have potatoes, and especially in those counties like Nyandarua, we have lots of it to the point that they have to throw away. And when they get the market is not sufficient. The market is not quite good. When we look at mangoes, as we speak, we have lots of them, but in the next couple of months we will be also having issues, because we'll be looking for fruits everywhere, and we'll be having, because we never value added anything, not the potatoes, not even the mangoes. The policies that African nations have, the agricultural policies that they have, are they to blame for sometimes we experience hunger, sometimes we experience glut?
So there's one time I attended a conference, and there's one wise man said, Africa does not need rainfall, it needs water. Agriculture needs water, not rainfall. But one of the challenges that African governments are facing when it comes to agriculture is over-reliance on rainfall, which is not necessarily the case. If you have visited big states in the United States, Iowa, Colorado, where they are leading agricultural states, they don't rely necessarily. In fact, if you think of Colorado, where I used to live, it's actually very cold and not that rainfall, but they do actually produce a lot. So what we need is technology. Some of the challenges we are facing is to what extent are we able to adapt to new technologies that we need. Of course, there's new technology coming from outside, but there's also indigenous technologies that local farmers have. To what extent are they harnessed to address some of the challenges we are facing? But I think across the board, regulatory reforms, access to markets, capacity, lack of skills, these are the areas that have really made our agricultural sector stagnate for many years. Not to be able to add value, which is needed, not to be able to create meaningful jobs that is needed. I think there are quite a number of areas that need to be actually looked upon more carefully for African countries to harness and tap into agriculture. Agriculture is the future of Africa. Let's not deny that. No one denies that. If we really want to make Africa grow, agriculture is where it should be. 60 to 70% of Africans are involved in agricultural sector, and the majority are in rural areas. This is not a small feat. It requires concerted effort between governments, practitioners, private sector, but it has to have the African-led mentality. Over-reliance on outside help, we have seen that has not proved since the era of independence. It started in the 1960s, you know. I think it's about time for Africa to take its leadership, and that's where PASGR comes in. We mobilize partners, we mobilize institutional stakeholders with the idea that we focus on generating evidences to the agricultural sector that is African-led, Africans for Africans. And I think it's about time we start thinking about that. It's about time we start doing that, putting in place appropriate policies that are needed to address the challenges we have, building the capacity of youth, and addressing negative mentality about agriculture. A few years ago, I attended a conference in Rome, invited by FAO and World Bank, and one of the conversation was, how do we address the hidden middle? The hidden middle of the value chain, from the farmer, from the downstream to all the way to upstream. How do we address the different supply chains that we need to be actually harnessed to bring out the best out of Africa? One of the presenter, I remember, said, it's only 5%. What we eat in the supermarket is only 5% of what is being produced. 95%.
5%?
Only 5%. In sub-Saharan Africa, 95% of that is not actually coming to the market. So the question is, how do we address the hidden middle? How do we bring out the youth, for example, in the agricultural sector, the different players in the value chains? How do we support those? This is a quiet revolution. It's happening. It's not waiting. You see, for example, urbanization, the rates at which cities are changing, the lifestyles are changing.
The population is ballooning.
Ballooning.
Yes.
So things are happening. There's a quiet revolution happening. The question is, how do we harness that? And I think this has been at the center of most of policy discussions in terms of how Africa can respond to these challenges, how Africa can actually address and uncover this hidden middle and know who is who within these supply chains to suitably support them.
Very good points by Doc Sharon, and something I've been able to pick from him is that the over-reliance of rain-fed agriculture is one of the things that Kenyans and Africa needs to change. Looking at the Middle East, looking at a state like Colorado, as he has mentioned. But Makueni has been able, indeed, Makueni has been benchmarked for so many things, but looking at what we are looking at today when it comes to mangoes, it has been able to make some strides other counties have not been able to do. What is it doing right?
As Daktari correctly put, the over-reliance on rainfall is a challenge in most African countries. But again, we can still work with what we have, and there are technologies that have been instrumental in enabling countries produce even with the rainfall that is there. Yeah, we talk about conservation agriculture, we talk about mulching, we talk about time of planting, and so on and so forth. And also the choice of crop. For instance, we focus on fruit crops, especially in areas where there is a challenge of rainfall, like in Makueni. So the challenge also is not just, so when we get production right and farmers are able to produce mangoes with a little rainfall, then what happens after that? Yeah, because then you've put in the work, you have produced your mangoes, then you go and the market wants them for less than what you have produce them for. And let's not even mention the production cost now with fertilizer prices over the roof. Yeah, and we are all complaining about food prices and so on. But does the farmer actually get value for the produce, for their mangoes, for instance? So when we don't have value addition processes in place, when we don't have industries like a fruit processing plant, then farmers will just see their hard-earned money go down the drain. What Makueni has done right is that they have put in place a factory, or they have intervened at the post-harvest bit, which is a big problem in Africa, so that farmers cannot lose their produce, but they can, put it somewhere. It can be taken up in a factory, it can be processed, and we can have maybe here in Nairobi we can buy mangoes in September, which is rare, and pay premium for that because we need mangoes. I'm just hoping that the same amount of money trickles down to the farmer so that they can still have, value for what they put out there. So it is a very interesting turn of events, but Makueni County has led by example. So if all counties say we have mangoes, not just in Makueni, in the whole of Ukambani, we've talked about parts of Pokot, if we can have fruit processing plants, then also issues around export, because when you talk about the fruit fly, which we've mentioned, this is basically when it comes to fresh produce. But when we value add, then it creates more markets out there. And so there would be, I think for the farmer, it would be very advantageous for them, because then they can get better prices for their mangoes, and so on and so forth. So
Indeed. And Doc, looking at a country like Kenya and the Horn of Africa, we have quite fertile soils, but looking at the cost of production and the post-harvest losses, that is a place that we have seen even in television, and it's quite disturbing. We've seen milk being poured, we've seen potatoes rotting and being thrown by the sides, or those being getting very little money for the whole thing, and they have sweated for months, as Sharon has talked about here. Their cost of production is quite high. How do we address this in the Horn of Africa?
That's $1 million question. It's not an easy question that I can answer in this interview, but I think post-harvest losses speaks to a number of issues. One is what Sharon was talking about: technologies, production, distribution, the whole value chain. Again, we're going back to the same conversation. Storage, production, distribution, marketing, post-production services, and so on and so forth. We need this. And one of the challenges we have seen is, for example, access to market, infrastructure challenges. For example, someone in Makueni is farming mango, but moving mango from interior, the road infrastructure.
Because of
number one. Number two, logistic infrastructure, because if mango is fresh produce, it needs to be stored in a certain environment to keep it fresh until it gets to the market. That's another challenge. But there's good news. There's good news. And Kenya is part of one of the early countries that ratified the Continental Free Trade Area. And if you look at the statistics for Kenya, exports to Kenya to other countries within Africa is only 40%. A huge chunk of exports goes out of Africa. And even within Africa, most of those exports, they go to Central and East Africa, not West Africa. So you see, there's an opportunity there in terms of tapping this agreement for which Kenya has ratified, and it has a national strategy, so to speak, to be able to harness and think about how can we tap some of these post-harvest losses, challenges to market access, all the things that you mentioned. More can be done. Private sector can be involved in this to support farmers in ensuring that they're able to make the best out of their produce, out of their labor. The government can rework some of the regulatory reforms, making it easy, for example, for farmers not only to produce but also to transport. Some of the taxes, for example, export taxes that are imposed on some of these commodities can actually be maybe waived to allow farmers to be able to sell outside Kenya and even within locally. So there are quite a number of structural adjustments that need to be done to help the farmers, the players within the agricultural sector. And I think it's about time to think about one of the fundamental challenges in our African settings is the middlemen. There's so many middlemen in between. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, because some of it is political economy, and politics, when you get in the way, so many things can go in a different direction. But how do we address the middleman issue? Because most of the time, farmers get very little, not because of post-harvest losses, not because of market access. Even when they have access, they don't have post-harvest losses. Sometimes they end up getting very little because of the middlemen in between, the network effect. How do we support, how do we dismantle these middlemen and empower farmers so that from farm to market becomes easier? They can actually make the best out of what their effort are put into.
Indeed, what Doc is talking about is quite insightful. Looking at even the market that we have, we've seen, I remember when there was a lot of potatoes and there's an outlet, a chain of restaurants we were talking about that, indeed, yes, we don't buy those potatoes because they are not as quality as we would want, and we have not structured an agreement with perhaps those farmers, but they talked about we are going to do that. But away from the politics of the day, the market itself, you may have the market, but it might not be the best market because those potatoes farmers are getting the market, but they are not happy about that because the cost itself, after taking out everything, the cost of production, the post-harvest losses, the transportation, the taxes, as Doc is talking about, then the farmer is demoralized. How can we try and help that? At least your two organizations are trying to uplift Africans as we are. But at the end of the day, we as a country, we also need to do something.
I think one of the ways that we can help the farmer is first make sure that what the farmer produces is what the market wants. You remember when we were talking about KFC and the protest around that, the problem was not that there were no potatoes. It's just that the potatoes we had were not the potatoes that KFC as a brand uses for production of its fries. So one thing that we can help the farmer with is ensure that whatever the farmer produces is what the market wants. That makes things very easy because if you have what I want, then I'll be willing to pay for that. Another thing that I think we can do, especially in our capacity in training, is to equip farmers with skills, negotiation skills. Also, farmers should be, in previous years, congregations has worked. So when farmers come together, they congregate, then they can negotiate as a bigger party compared to individuals. Then it has always worked. They would have a better price for that. So for me, I think one of the main ways or one of the main discussions we would have is how do we ensure that there is a link or there is no disconnect between whatever the market needs and what our farmers produce, because then that would be a great beginning. Yeah.
Indeed. And Doc, at the end of the day, when we do everything right, there's something that it's quite hard to control, the climate change that we're experiencing. We may come up with the best policies, but at the end of the day, the best markets, the best value addition, but we are doing quite badly when it comes to climate change.
Yes, I agree. Climate change has been it's real, number one. Let's acknowledge it. It's real. It has always been there. It has been a source of distress in the agricultural sector in Africa for many years. Think of as far back as the Ethiopian famine that happened in the 1980s. It's because of the weather challenges. But I think investment in research and development is key. A few years back, I was sitting in a panel in Addis to discuss about agricultural challenges and technological adoption in response to climate change and weather challenges that the continent is facing. There are two things that were the point of discussion. One is we do have indigenous knowledge on how to combat or fight climate change. Perhaps we need to also look into that. One of the problems that we have seen, at least from the evidence that I've read, is that we tend to push down these new approaches to farmers, and there's some sort of resistance in some areas because they don't understand them. They also have their own local ways of doing things. So I think balancing the two would be very important, but also important in investing in early warning systems, research and development. Israel was a desert. Where it is now, everyone goes to Israel to learn. What's the miracle there? Investment in research and development. Investment in early warning systems. Saudi Arabia now, look at Dubai. Where was it before? See where it is now. And it's completely desert. We are not in a desert country, so to speak, or the continent. So I think we and that's why I said earlier on, what Africa needs is not rainfall, it needs water. Where would you get water? That's a different conversation. But what you need is water to farm properly, right? So it even applies to weather challenges, climate change challenges. Yes, they're real. Yes, there are those that are exogenous in nature. There are those that are endogenous. They're within our reach that we can address. What are we doing there? And I think there's a lot of scope for more to be done in that space, investing in the relevant technologies, sensitizing farmers on the technological adoptions in technologies that actually have proved to work, seedling, identifying and investing in more productive seeds that are needed and resilient to different weather challenges. Of course, we have seen pushback from different governments. Tanzania, for example, they pushed back on GMOs and so on and so forth. But we need to think, where are our African scientists? Where are they? Because this is where we have people who study environment, people who study climate change. Where are they? This is the time these brains need to be used to address some of these things. And we have examples. We can go to Israel and learn. We can go to Dubai and learn. We can go to the United States and learn. I said Colorado is actually a very cold place. It's winter, it's cold, but they're still farming corn and onions. The size of the onion is as big as your head. Now, how do they do this? One of my very good friend, he was an agricultural scientist, and he used to actually have these big greenhouses where they actually do experiment. They invest heavily in science and in research and development. We can do the same. And I think as much as a little bit of climate change is exogenous in terms of the impacts that can actually affect us, not necessarily driven by us, we have some room to control some and minimize or mitigate some of the damaging effects of climate change, especially in the agricultural sector. How do we harness those? Where do we start? Who can do what? These are very pertinent questions, very poignant questions that we need to think about and answer. And I would like to acknowledge efforts that governments in Africa have started doing. This initiative is one of them. And we're engaging governments, but we have seen in the ministries of agriculture there are concerted efforts. We have institutions like AGRA and other platforms where they're also pushing for this agenda. How do we build that resilient and capacity of African farmers, policymakers, technologists, scientists to be able to come up with solutions that are homegrown and responding to our needs? This is the agenda that we should be discussing, and the serious investment that is needed in the agricultural sector if we are to at all transform and change the course of Africa's development.
Yes. And Sharon, just like Doc has talked about, we may have the best policies. We might go to Israel for benchmarking like 100 times. I remember after the 2013 government, almost all counties went to Israel for benchmarking. At the end of the day, what is not working? Is it the policies, or we don't have enough or sufficient scientists? As Doc has asked, where are our homegrown solutions?
The problem is not that we do not have enough policies. I think we have enough policies. Just maybe a point of improvement when it comes to policies would be we have a disconnect, or we have this lack of intersectoral linkages. So we have agriculture as one sector, and we have hospitality as one sector, and we develop separate policies while agriculture feeds into the hospitality industry. So we need to provide linkages for different sectors to collaborate or work together, and this would create more opportunities. Again, the policies are good. There's a lot to improve on when it comes to practice. Like what Utafiti Sera is all about, a lot of times policies are not informed by evidence, and when it comes to practice, then we have a problem, because then we have this very good policy, but it is not reflective on the challenges or the current issues that are faced on the ground. So having evidence and spaces where we can share evidence and, keep updating or keep changing our tact when it comes to practice can really help us translate policy into practice.
And Doc, let me commend you, because I've seen what your organization has been able to do. You were also fitted a couple of months ago. Kindly tell us about that.
Sorry?
You were fitted. You were given an award for a couple of months ago.
We were given an award late last year in Nigeria, recognizing our contribution in shaping policy, public policy and governance discourse in Africa, from building the capacity, training lecturers at the university level, policymakers, to Utafiti Sera, and generating evidence that shape policy discussions across a number of countries in Africa. And I think the award is a true testimony of our capacity. We are doing more. and we want to do more. I think the space is big for us to contribute. The demand is huge, supply is small, so I think we are going towards that direction. But the bigger picture here is public policy and governance challenges are real. These are the issues that we battle with every single day, whether in agriculture, whether in gender, whether in urbanization, whether in water or in evidence generation. What is critical, I think, that I would like to say and sort of give PASGR, an institution like PASGR, some level of credence is the need to build a culture of evidence. This is key. In typical African settings, policymakers tend to make decisions on ad hoc basis. There's no sensitization of evidence-based policymaking, and PASGR is at the center of that, over and above building capacity of the different stakeholders that are needed in that process. We need to create a culture, we need to harness a culture of valuing evidence for decision making. That has not been the case. And I think if people wish to see more evidence of what is coming out of our work, we position ourselves as a go-to place in public policy discourse, not only in Kenya, across a number of countries in Africa, in East Africa, West Africa, Francophone Africa. And I think there's more to be done in supporting that, in building the capacity of government, building the capacity of practitioners in generating that evidence. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. You can wrap it up in 1 minute, and especially you can touch on the Thursday and Friday.
Yes, so what I can say in 1 minute is that the conference that will be happening this Thursday and Friday would be very critical in shaping youth employment, especially in agriculture going forward. And I really look forward to the discussions and engagements between private sector, the government, investors, young innovators, and so on. And I think together we can chart a way forward on how do we create not just any kind of employment, but employment that we, the youth, want. We do not want to be part of the agriculture that has been, that we perceive as being backbreaking, dirty. You put a lot of investment in it with no returns. What we, the youth, want is, okay, we want to put in the work. There are technologies, advances in technologies. Dr. has correctly put, we need to be able to adopt and use those technologies to produce more. And when we produce, we want to find markets and a good price for our produce. So I really hope those discussions will tell us how do we get there, and how can everyone play their role in ensuring that we create employment for the youth in Kenya in the agriculture sector.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That has been Sharon Waswa from the Center for Africa Bioentrepreneurship. And also we had Dr. Anthony Mveyange, who is Executive Director of PASGR. We're trying to look at value addition, and especially when it comes to mangoes and potatoes. Kenya is one of the countries that is well respected when it comes to those two crops. But at the end of the day, the farmer is not getting what he should be getting. That is food for himself and others, and also coins or money in his pocket. Other than value addition, well, which is the other way that we can go to ensure that we do not rely on the rain-fed agriculture, as the experts have told us here. Thank you so much for watching. That has been News Check. My name is Njue, and now is this Susan Tuku, who is our sign language interpreter, at the bottom of your screen. But now we are giving rise to the Swahili part of the conversation. There will be Kurunzi, Mashinani, and Tamrini. Thank you so much for watching. Let's continue this conversation on our social media platform.